Welcome to the debate. Today we're diving into a critical discussion. We're challenging and exploring the concepts that were presented in E24, The Transformation of Nightclub Culture, which comes from NeonKore Media's program, The Deep Dive. Our exchange today, well, it's going to critically examine how these spaces, historically defined by freedom, by escape, have really evolved under some intense modern pressures. So I suppose our core question for this session is this: has the very soul of nightlife, that space for freedom and rebellion, has it been fundamentally swallowed up by contemporary economic pressures, by pervasive surveillance, and this relentless drive to commodify everything? Or, or is its deep-seated resilience simply leading it to adapt and transform into new kinds of social spaces? I'll be arguing that yes, its original spirit has been significantly compromised.
And I'll be making the case for its enduring capacity for adaptation and evolution. I'm ready to unpack these nuances.
Okay, so from my perspective, the core identity of nightlife, which, look, for so long served as this haven, right? A haven for rebellion and authentic liberation, that's been fundamentally undermined. Just consider the alluring facade of glamour we see. Take, for instance, King Street in Toronto, which the program, I thought rather effectively, dubbed the Wall Street of clubbing, because of its hyper-commercialized, really exclusive venue model. Now, this image, where some people are even paid to party, it's vividly illustrated by the actual experience of a bottle girl working in one of these places, as shared in NeonKore Media's material. Her reality? It was a high-pressure, commodified sales role, complete with contractual body policing, demanding supplemental duties that really blurred ethical lines, and just constant racial microaggressions. This reveals a brutal economic, hidden machinery beneath the surface. It's not just some glamorous escape. If you look historically, spaces like Storyville in New Orleans, as the material detailed, they offered genuine release, genuine creative freedom, particularly for Black jazz musicians who are facing pervasive racism and systemic marginalization. That stands in stark contrast, I think, to today's hyper-regulated, surveilled, and sectioned-off environments that, in their pursuit of profit, they seem to prioritize control over authentic human connection. The iron fist of regulation, as we've seen it described, think New York City's counterterrorism-like guidelines for venues, or Houston's punitive BYOB ordinance combined with the opaque, profit-driven practices of promoters, it's fundamentally altered these spaces, pushed them far from their original liberating spirit. And what this starkly reveals, I'd argue, isn't just individual exploitation, but a systemic insight. Modern nightlife has learned to commodify the very identities and social capital of its workers. It leverages pre-existing societal inequalities like race and gender to create this framework of economic extraction that fundamentally alters human interaction.
Right. While the challenges you've laid out regarding the shifts in nightlife's landscape are certainly undeniable, my interpretation of their impact on nightlife's core essence, it leads me to a significantly different conclusion. I believe the inherent human need for gathering, for music, for escape, which the program describes as almost primal, demonstrates nightlife's deep-seated resilience. I mean, throughout history, the legal status of substances, social rules, they've always been fluid, always subject to change. We only need to look at the shifting perception and eventual criminalization of cocaine, which was once, a celebrated wonder drug, to understand this constant state of flux. This fluidity, to me, suggests an ongoing capacity for adaptation, rather than some fundamental erosion of essence.
And look at the modern adaptations. The emergence of sober nights, daytime parties, multi-sensory venues that incorporate art exhibitions, even the BYOB club model, like Rumors in Houston that was mentioned. These prove the scene isn't lost, it's creatively evolving, a shift towards maybe more selective attendance for the biggest events, and mitigating cost burdens through models like BYOB. It suggests a reevaluation of value, perhaps a more considered engagement, rather than a complete surrender to commodification. These developments, I would argue, highlight nightlife's enduring capacity to find new forms of expression and social connection even under these new pressures. The crucial insight here, I think, is that this human impulse for connection and expression, it's not some fragile thing that's easily eroded. It's a fundamental force that, when confronted by pressure, consistently innovates and reshapes itself. And that leads to new forms of community that reveal the enduring, primal nature of gathering.
Okay, I see why you emphasize that inherent human need, but let's delve deeper into how that need is being met. And I'd argue, met in a fundamentally compromised way, particularly when we talk about the commodification of the individual. The experience of the bottle girl, as detailed in the material, it vividly demonstrates this. Her assertion that your face is your fortune, coupled with, contractual weight limits, strict appearance rules, these supplemental duties that blurred into overt exploitation, like being pressured to join guests for shots or dance with them. It points to an extreme commodification, a dehumanization, frankly. Her story of playing the game and actively seeking proximity to whiteness just to survive financially, it reveals a systemic vulnerability. These aren't minor issues. They're core to how these spaces function. They treat individuals not as guests or even just employees, but as assets. Assets to be meticulously managed, controlled, leveraged for maximum profit. This level of instrumentalization, it goes far beyond typical service industry pressures.
That's a compelling point, but I would frame it differently. I see these aspects as perhaps extreme manifestations of high-stakes service and sales positions, not necessarily unique to the core erosion of nightlife itself. While acknowledging the demanding, often harsh nature of the bottle girl's role, and the, yes, uncomfortable aspects of body policing you describe, these pressures, however intense, they do bear some resemblance to historical precedents. Think about the early jazz musicians in Storyville. They also faced immense pressure, as the material explained, working insane double shifts, often fueled by substances, just to keep going. This shows that sacrifices for economic survival, adherence to demanding professional standards, they have deep historical roots in nightlife, even in its most quote-unquote authentic iterations.
And the age-out phenomenon you touched on, where performers or workers are deemed too old, well, while certainly difficult, it reflects a reality in many youth-centric industries, doesn't it? From modeling to professional sports. It's not necessarily a unique, fundamental erosion of nightlife's core purpose, but rather a persistent, albeit harsh, challenge within certain roles. We're discussing a human reality of certain competitive, appearance-driven professions, which, while maybe heightened here, isn't inherently new to the fabric of these entertainment spaces.
While you draw parallels to historical pressures, I'm just not convinced the context of those pressures is the same. Storyville, even amidst its exploitation, it presented a distinct kind of cultural freedom, particularly for certain groups. Nightlife's historical function as let's say, a release valve, a counter-narrative for marginalized groups, exemplified by Storyville being a refuge for Black jazz musicians facing pervasive racism, that is severely undermined by today's section culture and these escalating economic barriers. The example cited of Houston clubs requiring, a $300 deposit plus a 4-bottle minimum for a section, that literally divides the dance floor into haves and have-nots. It directly hinders spontaneous social mixing, that authentic connection. It creates a hierarchy that really contradicts the very idea of a communal release. And furthermore, Daryl Hester's recession pop theory, this idea that during economic downturns, popular music often shifts to reinforce fantasies of unattainable wealth, creating aspirational escapism. It suggests contemporary music makes clubs an extension of an already kind of fake and empty world for Gen Z, prioritizing performance over genuine connection. This isn't just evolution, it feels like a fundamental shift away from authentic community and collective liberation. It truly makes you pause, doesn't it? To consider how the very spaces we once sought for escape are now mirroring the control structures of society at large.
I agree that economic barriers are significant, and yes, they can reshape interactions. But I still believe that primal human need to gather, dance, escape, it remains potently active, and it is finding new avenues for expression. Adaptations like sober nights, daytime parties, venues integrating art exhibitions. They offer alternative spaces for connection. They move beyond traditional clubbing models, and maybe some of its inherent economic pressures. These aren't just concessions. You could argue they're new forms of community. And the trend of people becoming more selective, maybe saving up for the big events, suggests a renewed search for quality experiences, for deeper engagement. Not a complete abandonment of the desire for connection. It's a reprioritization, perhaps, of what constitutes a valuable social experience.
And look, models like the BYOB Club in Houston, by shifting cost burdens to the patrons themselves who bring their own alcohol, often cheaper than buying it at the bar, they actually keep social spaces open, keep them accessible. They allow new forms of community to flourish even if the context is different. So while the dance floor might be sectioned off, that impulse to find community persists. It demonstrates how resilience often manifests in these creative, practical solutions to economic hurdles. What's your take on the ongoing presence of this underlying human need for connection, even if the forms change?
That's an astute observation, and it leads me to wonder, if that adaptability is constantly pushing into less regulated, sometimes more dangerous spaces, are we truly preserving the essence of liberation, or just witnessing its displacement into more precarious forms? Because while new models emerge, the pervasive presence of ubiquitous surveillance and control fundamentally alters the core experience. The intense modern regulation, like NYC's Best Practices Guide, as detailed in the material, it reads more like a counterterrorism plan, doesn't it? With mandated forensic-level evidence preservation, saving all money transactions, detaining witnesses, 30-day video storage, enhanced lighting for video ID. It transforms nightlife into what feels like a panopticon on the dance floor. Foucault's idea, where constant, almost invisible surveillance makes individuals regulate their own behavior. It makes the space feel like a potential war zone.
And Houston's BYOB ordinance, with its requirements for FBI background checks, mandatory metal detectors, extensive video surveillance, it explicitly labels a permit as a privilege, not a right. That indicates an overarching push for state control, far beyond mere safety. It actively stifles the spontaneity and freedom these spaces once represented. It feels like a fundamental shift from release to control.
I hear your points regarding the intensity of these regulations, but again, I believe they speak to resilience rather than solely erosion of freedom. While stringent, these regulations often emerge in response to real, perceived threats and concerns about public safety, about criminal activity. For instance, the material mentioned Dallas's attempt to close strip clubs at 2 a.m. specifically because of documented increases in violent crime nearby. It illustrates how these measures are often a reaction to societal challenges. And the historical whack-a-mole dynamic, where efforts to control vice just push activities into less regulated spaces, it shows that the tension between freedom and order is ongoing, it's complex, it's a perpetual negotiation, not some one-sided imposition. These measures, despite their intensity, they're framed as attempts to manage complex environments.
And in some cases, like with the BYOB ordinance, maybe they inadvertently allow for the continued operation of social spaces that might otherwise just shut down completely due to economic or regulatory pressures. If the choice is between stringent regulation and no space at all, then even this high level of control paradoxically preserves a form of collective gathering. So isn't it maybe more accurate to say these are attempts to manage inherent risks in public spaces rather than a deliberate total extinguishment of the spirit of freedom?
While I grasp your argument about managing public risks, I would argue that what we're seeing isn't just management, it's a profound shift toward control that fundamentally alters the nature of the space itself. And this is further exacerbated by the opaque economic structures, these potentially unethical practices that further erode authenticity. The murky world of entertainment promoters, as the program highlighted, operating in a largely cash business with a history of corruption and uneven record-keeping, it fosters an environment that's ripe for quid pro quo cross-promotions, for potential bribery, and just a profound lack of transparency. Their immense power at the door, including total discretion on entry and this social engineering based on status or race, it suggests a system designed primarily to extract value, to prioritize quick cash and fake exclusivity over fostering any kind of genuine community.
This opaque system fundamentally contradicts the idea of a truly liberated space, where individuals connect authentically. It feels like a system that, at its heart, prioritizes profit and control over the genuine human experience, making any remaining freedom feel a bit like an illusion.
My perspective, though, leads me to interpret these trends quite differently, really focusing on the complex business realities of the entertainment industry. The role of promoters, who often run, a mini club inside the main club for a night, it's crucial for filling venues, for keeping the nightlife ecosystem alive, especially when the industry itself is, frankly, hurting badly and facing immense economic pressure. The material cited significant challenges: Stonegate Pub Company's $2.5 billion debt, that nearly 24% increase in the consumer price index between 2020 and 2025. These aren't just abstract numbers, they represent immense pressure on operators. So the complexity of financial arrangements, the rise of amateur promoters leveraging social media for perks, it reflects an industry adapting its business models just to survive, to attract patrons in these really challenging economic and cultural landscapes.
While these practices might seem murky or opaque from the outside, they are often essential, if sometimes informal, ways to keep the entertainment sector viable. I mean, without these mechanisms, many venues simply wouldn't survive, would they? And then there would be no spaces at all for any form of gathering or expression. So while we might question the methods, can we really deny their necessity in preserving the mere existence of these social hubs, even if their operation is complex?
Right. So to summarize my position then, the evidence as I see it consistently points to a fundamental transformation of nightlife. It's moving away from its historical roots as a space of authentic rebellion, freedom, toward increasingly controlled, commodified, and often exploitative environments. From the deeply personal experiences of those on the front lines, like the bottle girl feeling compelled to seek proximity to whiteness just to survive, to the overarching regulatory and economic structures that carve up dance floors and dictate appearances. The true essence of spontaneity, of genuine connection, it appears to be consistently eroded. The adaptations we see, well, they often occur within this very framework of control and commodification, rather than truly transcending it. The hidden machinery of profit, it seems, has become the dominant force, reshaping the very human interactions that once defined these spaces.
And while acknowledging these undeniable pressures and significant changes, I must re-emphasize nightlife's deep-seated resilience and its profound capacity for adaptation. That primal human need to gather, to dance, to escape. It ensures its continued existence, albeit in evolving forms. These adaptations, whether they are new social formats like sober nights, modified economic models such as BYOB clubs, or even the reprioritization towards big events, they demonstrate creative responses. They allow new expressions of connection and community to emerge, even within a more regulated and economically challenging landscape. The spirit of human connection, I believe, finds a way. It finds new stages, new expressions, even if the familiar lights dim and the context shifts dramatically. The essence, I would argue, endures precisely by transforming.
And so we continue to disagree on the extent to which that essence of nightlife has been preserved or perhaps fundamentally lost, existing now only maybe in name.
Indeed. It's a testament, really, to the complexity of how economic pressures, historical context, and these evolving social dynamics continually redefine these crucial spaces for human connection and communal experience.
Absolutely. The question of whether a genuine vibe can truly exist when the dance floor is sliced into sections, when interactions are filtered through these unattainable wealth fantasies, and when surveillance is ubiquitous, well, it's one that compels deeper thought long after the lights come up. It's certainly a conversation that highlights the ongoing tension between our desire for liberation and, well, the relentless forces that seek to shape and control it.